There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Like I just need it a little higher.
Yeah, change it. Lean back a little bit.
Steph.
Good. How are you, Ellie?
I'm doing well, thank you. Happy Wednesday.
Yes, happy Wednesday. We're
That's
back.
AJ waving at us?
It is. Talk to him today too. Thanks for being on, AJ.
Yeah. So today, Steph and I are going to talk about recovery. And I don't even know where to start.
I know. Yeah, we could just. So what? I guess for starters, why is recovery important? What do you tell your athletes about recovery? I guess what do we even mean by that word?
Yeah. So when I think of recovery, I think of like four things. I think of rest, just general rest. I think of fuel, so nutrition, hydration, and no, that's about it. Three things. I'm missing one. Sleep. That's the one. So I think of those four things in particular, and I think when you think about recovery, your goal is to get it. Like that's, I think, the biggest thing is that you're getting some, and it can be a little bit of an elusive thing. So maybe we can talk about those sort of four, I'm going to say, buckets.
Yeah.
Specifically, and move the conversation from there. So what would you say would be like the right amount of sleep to be getting for a runner? For anyone, but for a runner.
Definitely. For endurance athletes, 8 to 10 hours, which sounds crazy, right? For some people, especially if you have children, if you work, if you like to do things outside of those two activities. But 8 to 10 hours is where the money's at. We know just how important that is for rebuilding muscle, even bone turnover. So really anything that helps reduce injury risk, because I mean we've said this over and over, right? Stress plus recovery equals improvement. Without that recovery, you're not going to see improvement.
Yeah.
Do you have any other recommendations? There's 8 to 10 hours kind of where you recommend?
That's exactly where I would fall as well. And I think that 8 to 10 is hard to get for a lot of just working adults.
Yeah.
And I don't think folks understand how, like, what happens when you sleep. And we don't need to like get in the weeds there, but you know, when you're sleeping, you're getting a lot of the benefits of your workout worked out in your body, essentially.
Yeah.
So there's those components, and then as you mentioned, with like bone turnover and like healing, that sort of thing, it is such a critical component to being a successful athlete and runner. Yeah, I think sleep is probably, of the recovery things, probably in my opinion, one of the most important ones. But that sort of recipe, the stress plus rest equals recovery, equals progress. The recovery piece is the one that's most neglected, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, if your runners, this just kind of popped in my head, if your runners end up with 4 or 5 hours of sleep the night before, do you ever have a conversation with them like, hey, we're just not going to do a workout today? Or how do you go about addressing lack of sleep?
Yeah, it's tricky because I don't always know how much sleep my runners are getting, and it's not always, I would say, like, we go through waves of conversation, right? Like sometimes it's really clear they need help with nutrition. Sometimes it's really clear they need some reminders on sleep. But this is where that RPE discussion comes into play as well. It's like, you know, if you didn't get enough sleep, where does that put you on the scale of readiness to show up for any type of workout? Typically, it's going to put you on the lower end of the scale for readiness, and more than likely, your heart rate and physiological system are going to respond that way as well.
Right, that's right.
My phone is like slowly sliding down. So yeah, that's the conversations that I have with my runners, is really knowing when to make adjustments if they feel like they haven't gotten the recovery they need.
Right.
What about you? What would you say to that?
I guess I haven't had that conversation with them yet, but I have toyed with the idea of kind of readiness to train scales with one of the factors being if you get less than a certain amount, we're either going to make it an easy day, like scratch the workout, or just a fast walk or something like that. I do have them track their hours of sleep in training. Some of them do, some of them don't. I ask them to. But that can just give me a better window too into like if something pops up or if they're starting to feel fatigued, does it come back? Or is it the lowest hanging fruit? Is it sleep, or is there something else that we have to address?
Yeah. I think just the possibilities for why somebody could be struggling during a workout are endless, but sleep is very low hanging fruit. That can make a world of difference to how somebody feels showing up on any given day. So, and I personally don't have my athletes track, I tend to approach it of like, I really want to give them the knowledge and understanding that they can make adjustments on things that I've programmed and that I want them to a lot of the time. And so I tend to program on like a weekly basis. And each week, you might find like, somebody has like just a really stressful week. And stress makes recovery harder. And so sometimes you just want somebody who's had a really stressful week to say like, either walk or take your runs pretty mellow, and we can work in a little spice here and there when you're just feeling better.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think for some people, just the act of tracking it improves their habits. They know that someone else is going to be looking. And so I think that's something that they struggle with, and they can just, sometimes I may not even see it or investigate it too much, but they actually enjoy doing that as part of their keeping them on track.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It's more data point to make note of in your training experience. It's like you want to try and collect, I would say, as much, I don't know, sometimes data is like it's like a black hole of information.
Yeah.
But I do think like easy data to collect is, sleep data is fairly easy. And watches, they track that kind of stuff too a lot of the time, how much you're sleeping. I don't know how accurate that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think it can overestimate it. So I think exactly like you said, it's very difficult. Then you can get into the weeds with the REM versus light versus deep, and that can be overload for sure. But just general like time in bed can be helpful for sure. But aiming for that 8 to 10 hours, I think, is the most important part. Looks like we might have a question. Okay. We can get into this now. So AJ asked, thoughts on quote recovery runs, oxymoron, or do they have a place?
Oh gosh, great question. I think they have a place. That's like, in the work that I work with, a lot of really type A personalities, and a lot of runners just are in general. And I think that building in a specific run that's like, way slower than what you feel like your normal conversation pace run is a great way to stretch against the range of your RPE and pace zones. So that that like running slow isn't detrimental to your outcomes with like racing and that sort of thing. So I think they do. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. With that said, for some people, that recovery run might actually be a fast walk. So I like the point though about, finding their range and getting to a run that's just much slower than they feel capable of, or than they thought would give them benefits. From that perspective of varying the forces on your joints and muscles. Might actually find that it's harder to run that slow for some people. But when we get to a certain range too, sometimes that could just turn into a very fast walk, and that's going to give you very similar bang for your buck, I think.
Yeah. I think too, it's a very good opportunity to be self-honest about where someone's heart rate is. Mm-hmm. And I don't use, like, I've gone the gamut of like trying to get people to use heart rate and then not having great success with that. But I think where I tend to pay attention the most to heart rate as a coach is on their recovery or even just conversation-based runs. If they head out on a recovery run and they're creeping into zone 3 and 4 at any moment, I'm like, you didn't do this right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was not recovery.
So, and same with a fitness walk, it's hard with a fitness walk to get up into those zones unless you're like on an incline. But yeah, fitness walks, we've talked a lot about that. They show up very regularly and are a great way to afford someone a chance to recover without, risking that if they're not doing a recovery run, they do actually get that recovery.
Absolutely, yeah. He said, agree, did 15-minute fast walk plus 25-minute easy run. Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was probably like a very low effort for you, but allowed you to get, again, more tissue tolerance, more time on your feet, and just to mentally feels good. Like, oh wow, running can be really enjoyable. And it should be a lot of times a conversation pace, but oftentimes we might push that conversation pace a little bit.
Yeah. And I think when they show up too, it becomes less threatening to people to have to do them. Because they know they can expect that this is going to show up and this is the type and style of workout I need to do today to progress, to get recovery.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. All part of that process.
Yeah.
So I guess going back then to the other recovery pieces that we talked about. So we touched on sleep. Should we do nutrition next?
Yeah. I think, do you want to touch on that? We've got a whole thing on nutrition, but we can touch on it specifically. Do you want to start?
Yeah. So just to be brief, because I think that other video, we covered it a lot, but I was about to say that the recovery piece starts like, right after your workout, and how then consuming protein is going to help you rebuild the muscle. But I think the foundation is still the biggest part. If we kind of rewind back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago, your recovery isn't just what you eat within the 30 minutes to 3 hours after you run. It's going to be affected by the timing of your eating throughout the day, especially for women. Even like spreading out your meals from, if you aren't able to eat throughout the day, that can really impact your energy availability as well. It's not just about how much you get throughout the day, it's that timing. So I'd recommend watching that video, but just knowing that nutrition, what fuel you're putting in your body, specifically for females, I think where a lot of us are low on protein and calories, is going to affect how well you're recovering.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I would say. It's like, if you're not getting enough fuel, you're also not going to be able to repair your tissues in the way that they need to repair to adapt positively. Right. And I think that's like the thing, like it's about positive adaptation of your tissues and your body in general. And too often, lack of fuel as part of the recovery and the timing just leads to negative adaptations. And, for a lot of runners, that can mean tissue injuries, that can mean bone stress injuries, that can mean fatigue.
Yeah, just plateau.
Yeah. So, recovery in that sense is just like getting enough food.
Absolutely.
And the timing, like you mentioned, can be really valuable in your refinement of moving that needle forward. And protein, especially after a workout, is probably what folks need to focus on. To repair tissues.
Absolutely. Yeah. Perfect. And then, for more on that, I mean, we've got some good connections, but the video that we did is on my Instagram TV, so you can go back to that one. So next, hydration. That's another one.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more from you, because this is an area where I'm always like, well, this is the recommendation, but are you thirsty? Like,
yeah, I think hydration probably in terms of like the scale of importance is lower on the scale, but it certainly still matters. And so my general rule of thumb is drink when you're thirsty. Women tend to overhydrate and drink too much water, to thinking they like have to drink a lot of water to like either be prepared for a race or recover from what they just did. And we know enough now that like our systems are pretty good at knowing when we're thirsty. And so my rule of thumb is to drink when you're thirsty. And certainly if somebody's like really struggling with hydration after long runs and things of that nature, then we might try to be specific about it. But I find that most people don't need that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we used to always hear if you wait until you're thirsty to drink, you're already dehydrated. That's probably got a lot of us just chugging water.
Exactly. Yeah, have you read the book Endure?
No.
It's a good book. It's by Alex Hutchinson, I want to say.
Okay.
Great book, and he talks about just like performance variables and things of that nature. And hydration is one of his like chapters, I guess.
Okay.
And they've done some interesting looks at that and how, the recommendation, it's been a couple years since I've read that book, so don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he was saying like you want to be like a little dehydrated before you start a race or a run. So thirsty, like, not like parched completely, but not overly hydrated.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting to know. I'll have to pick up that book, but not like a stomach full of water.
Right.
Okay. Right. And with that point too, with hydration, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about fueling, but not just having water for those efforts that are like more than an hour. Making sure some of your hydration is also including sodium and carbohydrates, a hydration beverage. I don't know that helps with recovery. My guess would be that it would, since it's gonna top off your glucose stores, but it's a little bit out of my scope of knowledge.
Yeah, same. Great. So then the last sort of topic is just that general rest. And I think when it comes to rest, we're thinking about training intensity and how much time you need between like certain styles of runs. What would you say to that?
I think a good general rule is between hard efforts, hard workouts, at least 48 hours, sometimes even 72. Between other runs, so typically how I'll set it up is, well, actually, it really varies from person to person based on their schedule. I talk to people about which day is, do they have a bigger amount of time to devote to a workout? What day do they, maybe is a more stressful day that we're not going to do a hard workout. So I don't have like Tuesday, Thursday is always a workout day, but at least 48 hours. And then between runs, I don't work with anyone right now who's doing doubles. I think people can tolerate that getting, when they're a higher level and they've been running consistently for a long time. So mine are about 24 hours apart where I'll have people do that.
Yeah, I would say the same as well. I think intensity can vary to such a great degree. When you're thinking about like the upper end of intensity, I'm giving several days of recovery. I'm going to say recovery before they might do another like intense effort.
Right. They're still running, but those conversation pace days in between.
Right. Exactly. And then same thing here. Like I don't program 2-a-days. That's just not something that I've felt like it was necessary. And I think if somebody were doing 2-a-days, it'd probably be that we're making sure they're at least getting a 12-hour window or 8 to 10 hours, and not doing both those at hard efforts.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think like the point of 2-a-days is, in my head, is just to add volume. So, that's what I would say generally about that. I feel like I'm missing something, and I wanted to say something else, but I can't remember.
Yeah. If it comes, let me know. We'll talk about it. But I think I would completely agree with you on several days for those very high intensity efforts.
Yeah.
Or even, the long run, even though it's generally not intense, that total stress is going to be higher from the, obviously from that increased duration. So after that too, I generally program an easy day or two before a workout.
Yeah, same. Yeah, especially when long runs are starting to get longer too each week. Somebody might be able to tolerate a long run consistently over time on the weekend very well, but then once you start adding that run volume, you got to start thinking, how are we giving them the recovery? Because stress is cumulative. So there's, short bursts of stress at a time, like, hard one day workout, but then there's also the cumulative stress over time. And I think as a coach, it can be kind of tough to always know, is an athlete getting in the right recovery? Are they getting enough recovery?
Yeah.
There's just so many variables there that you're trying to juggle. So I'm curious to hear from you if you have any thoughts on that and how you work with your runners and, being able to tell if somebody's recovering.
That's a big question. I don't have any great, philosophical answers, but I think I say this all the time. It's like it just always come back to the communication. And so whether that's through notes and training peaks, sometimes people will mark down, like for heavy today was a little bit harder. And if it's something that seems worthy of a phone call or a text, I'll do that. If it's something that they can attribute it to, like, oh, but I was up, for a couple hours each night because of this and this, then okay, maybe we can attribute it to that. But if it's something that's continuing to happen or something that's concerning, then I'll reach out. But and then just monitoring sleep, I think giving them the information ahead of time and then going over it as well if we get on a call each month of the importance of sleep, rest, nutrition, hydration, basically talking about what we did here and making sure they're understanding that, so that when they or if they start to feel fatigued or like they're hitting a plateau, they feel like that line of communication is completely open.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think communication makes a big difference. And I think that a lot of people, when things aren't going the way that they think, they'll be more communicative in that sense, and that helps give you a window into what could potentially be going wrong, and filling those holes. And I think with recovery, like you kind of touched on, it's just such an elusive, like ever moving thing. There's no great way to measure it. There's no perfect science there.
Right.
But I think it was Ty Magnum. So if you're not in the Runner's Zone group and you're a physical therapist or coach, join the Runner's Zone. It's on Facebook. It's Chris Johnson's group. And he's got some incredible resources in there. Ty Magnum is a coach, and I think he does like a lot of physiology stuff.
Yeah, especially I think respiratory. And he's done research on fatigue.
Yes. And so, he mentioned that, fatigue is like threefold. It's the psychological aspect of fatigue, the peripheral. So by peripheral, we mean like muscles and tendons and bones, and then the central, which is like your central nervous system. Did I get that right? Do you know?
Yeah. So central nervous system is like consider your brain and your spinal cord.
Yes. Yeah. So 3 components to fatigue, and you're constantly trying to figure out if somebody isn't recovering, what component isn't going well, and sometimes in workouts, that means either doing a fitness walk instead of a hard run or an easy run instead of a hard run. But it's really hard, I think, to be able to know for certain what somebody needs. It also might mean programming in just unstructured activity.
Totally, yes.
To give somebody just like a mental break from just so much structure.
So much rigidity, yeah, absolutely. And all multiple, like even with that, we can't really pinpoint which type of fatigue it might be, you know? So I think they do all, it's just so complicated, but,
The moral of the story is you need to be prioritizing recovery equal to your training,
mhm,
or you're not going to start to make the benefits in your training that you want to make. And that's very physiological. So, like we know that if you're not getting enough sleep, you risk injury, you risk poor performance, you increase your heart rate, all of these things.
mhm.
We know the same is true with fuel. So, you know, that's like the moral here.
Absolutely, yes. And one other point on that, even if you are injured and you're not doing the same level of activity that you were, these things are still very important, if not more important, to increase your sleep, really nail nutrition, because that's going to help your healing and recovery. I think I've been guilty of this. like, oh, well, I didn't run an hour today. I haven't run an hour a day for 4 weeks, so I don't need as much sleep. No, that's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I mean, I think just like anybody, we're all human. We're all prone to making choices that maybe aren't like in our own best interest.
Yeah.
And that brings me back to the value of having a coach and having somebody that if you're trying to reach for goals, especially, or even just trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle, that you have somebody that can sort of hold up a mirror and say, well, what's missing here? Like, is it your sleep? Are you not getting enough food? Here are the requirements for those things. Like, where could we potentially plug some holes so that you can feel the way you want to feel and perform the way you want to perform?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, make sure you're sleeping.
Yep.
Drinking water.
Resting. Yeah. And consider getting a coach.
Yes. This actually brings up another question that I could ask you. In terms of recovery, I think people tend to think like, oh, the more days off, the better. I'm curious, maybe not the better, but I'm curious to know from your perspective, how often are you programming in days off for folks? And if you are?
Yeah, great question. That I also think depends on the person. I'd say on average, there's a full day off, maybe once every 10 days. It's not a specific day off every week, except for some cases, like I said, where a couple athletes I have are doing very long runs. And so I want them to have that day off. And not only because of the tissue stress, but because of the number of hours that's taking from their family. So it's important to them to have a day where it's like, great, I can spend this whole day with my family. So it's not a one size fits all. I think that there have been studies that come out that like people who run 5 days a week are less likely to get injured, but I'm not talking about running specifically. Like it's on with people who are running just 3 or 4 days a week, their other days are going to be fast walks. So they're still doing something, but it's going to decrease the stress on their body. But I'd say that true days off, averaging either once a week or once every 10 days.
Yeah. I would say I agree. It's like very person dependent. A lot of people just feel like they don't have time to exercise every day, to do a run or a walk every single day. And similar though, I think I try to keep people on their feet as much as I can. So, days off will show up for people that I know probably need one. And usually there's like also the optional fitness walk if they have time for it. So, but I don't have a structure there. Like I know like some people do, 10-day sort of like training cycle types of deals. I tend not to have too much of a structure because I try to encourage my athletes to contact me at the beginning of the week. That's not always working out perfectly, but if they can and they have stuff coming up, then they can tell me, like, I can't be doing a run this day or that day. And it can change so quickly. So
to that point, life ends up throwing some days off at you once in a while, you know. So even if it's programmed in and, you know, things got busy, the baby got sick, whatever, then that's going to be a day off. You don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Either, you know, travel days. So I agree with you. It comes back to just one, person dependent and life dependent.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people too really like structure. And so they like to be able to predict when the days are going to be off pretty consistently. So there's no like drop in their structure.
Definitely. Yeah. That's where the 10-day cycles don't really work well unless you're a professional athlete. And it's, absolutely.
Dedicating every day to running.
Yeah. And it's not like the weekends have, you know, more time for things or, you know, stuff like that typically.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Awesome.
Well, is there anything else? Are there any questions?
Yes, I don't see any questions. No, we can wait a minute though.
Steph and I are always happy to answer any questions about running. So feel free to DM or email or whatever.
Yeah. And if we don't have the answers, we know people who will. So
I hope.
Yeah, exactly. Or we'll just make it up. No kidding.
Yeah.
Got a thumbs up. Awesome. No questions. So this will post to my IGTV right after, and then we'll post it on Facebook as well. Again, if you have any questions, send either of us a message. And otherwise, everybody have a good night.
Yeah. See you later, Steph.
Bye.
Yeah.